Recording. Come on. There we go. Cool. Didn't show up. Right. So good afternoon, everybody. It's great to have you back for another crisis management meeting. And week's topic is really sort of getting back to work. And you sort of plan. Well, you try and plan things out as we go through. And sort of last week, I was thinking, sort of, what sort of topics should we do? And we had another week left of the sort of the lockdown, so I thought, right, well, now's the right time to do this. And I posted it all out on Monday, and literally an hour after I posted it, Boris comes on the TV and says, well, we're not too sure we're going to come out of lockdown in 2 weeks' time. And it was like, oh God, perhaps we've gone a little bit early. But I've certainly got a couple of clients that they are actually going through the coming back to work right now. So they've got some work that they can get on with. So actually going through this process. So whether we are back to some form of sort of anti-lockdown in a couple of weeks' time, or whether this is just knowledge that is going to be used, make notes and used in a 2 weeks' time, 3 weeks' time, I think it's still very, very relevant for all of us. So just want to introduce our guests today, our sort of our panel. We've got Stephanie, that those that have been on these before will know Stephanie, and sort of coming really from the HR perspective and a little bit of the legal side of what we should be thinking about. And we've got Myles Downey, who's I've been honoured enough to have been trained by Myles on a number of occasions since I've been with Action Coach. I've read with vigour his I don't think I've read all of your books, Myles, but I've had a good crack at most of them. And a real insight into coaching, performance mindset. There's a couple of his books that he's written up there, and really just to sort of come at it from a slightly different approach rather than just the legals. This is what we're going to do, actually come from the human perspective. We really, at the end of the day, we're dealing with people, human beings who think and act in ways that sometimes frustrate us all as business owners. But there are certain patterns that we've got to be aware of, and to actually be able to deal with that. So we'll be coming to those as we go through today. So what I wanted to start with, because this sort of return, the lockdown, we've got another week to go before they're sort of making that proper decision. But in my mind was going to be that sort of first full week or second full week of May. It was, a lot of us are sitting, some of us have got team members that are working from home. Some people have actually furloughed and closed down completely. Some of you are still working, probably as busy, if not busier than ever. But we've got to understand that the furlough law as it is at the moment allows us to keep people on furlough until the 30th of June. So whatever Boris comes in and says lockdown is going to be sort of relaxed, we have still a window, quite a big window here, to decide whether we do really want to come back. And just because everyone else is doing it, just because there's a pressure that you want to get out of the home, maybe, I think there are some things we've got to think about. Is when is the time right for us to come out of furlough? So before you do anything, is really got to sit down and think strategically, is when is the right time. Same as if this was the first day of your business. When is your opening day? When is the right time? It's not just, I need to do it on Monday. You've got to have a plan and a strategy around it. And, for some of you, I reckon there will be some sector extensions on this. Not everyone, when that furlough, I think some industries, certainly the leisure side of things, anything that's to do with big groups, we may find that the government allow those people to actually have an extension. Nothing's been said yet, but, be prepared for that. So the first thing I think we need to think about is, from a customer perspective, what are our customers doing? We said right at the start of this, one of the first things you need to be doing is talking regularly to your customers, finding out where their minds are, what are they doing? Because there's no point you going straight back to work. Let's say it was on the Monday, open up your shop and there's no customers there. You've got no sales, you've got no income. Okay, so really got to really understand. If you haven't done, get on the phone, talk to your customers, really speak to where they are in their cycle, because it's going to be a domino effect. This as it all we start coming back to work. Where are you in that domino process? Are you right at the front, you need to be getting there, or you right at the back and you've got a few more weeks of that lag? So really look at where your customers are. The other thing is, keep an eye on your competitors. We've got, some of you, some of my clients have been, we've managed to stay open through the entire process of it, where all the customers have closed down. And at the moment we've got massive competitive advantage. We're sort of right in that marketplace. I wouldn't say necessarily dominating it, but I think we've gained nearly 20% new customers in the last 3-4 weeks. So if you have furloughed and customers are still there, then there might be an urgency to get back quicker. If your customers are all still dithering around, again, it might be a chance for you to gain some competitive advantage to be in the market early. But it's got to come from a place of strategy rather than just reacting to what the marketplace is doing. And then number one, I think, I know I've put it number 3, but I still think number 1 is always, what do your numbers say? Look at the numbers. If you bring people back in, you're taking on that responsibility of that increase of cost, and unless you've got an income stream that is going to match that, then part of me is saying that some of you, you're going to be best off maintaining that furlough position, right to the end of June. And then that brings the mix in of, do you bring all of the people back off furlough? Do you bring some of them? If you're doing a mix and match, how do you actually decide who comes back? And as we'll go into when we're sort of talking to Steph, there's also that issue of, you may not want to bring everybody back. You may not be able to bring everybody back. And at that point, you're going to have to let people go, make them redundant, in which case you've got to make sure you've got some process that you've been through that decides whether Joe gets made redundant or whether Fred gets made redundant. So really, I know a lot of you have done cash flows for the bank to get the civils loan, but you've got to be really looking at cash flow for your own purposes and what if analysis. If sales are this, what do we need? If sales are this, what do we need? Okay, so cash flow is really, really key. And the third and the fourth C, because it always comes in 4s like this, I couldn't think of one as a C, so I went back and said it's about the team. Okay, so what's right for the team? Have a think about where they are, what they're doing. And again, really analyze who you've got. Some of the comments that we've been having on the WhatsApp group about some team members have really helped us with this and worked with us, other team members haven't. And really that's where we're going to focus on the discussion today. But while team is important, really do think customers, competitors, cash flow. Really think about those 3 before you make that commitment. And now's the time. You've got another week of this. We'll hurt. I think the sort of reverse lockdown is going to be. Boris is going to be talking about it next week. So I think it will be a gradual stage thing to get the country back moving. But you've got to make your strategies, your plans, based around what and your markets, and that is going to take some real strategic brain power. Furloughing, closing down was easy. That you didn't have a choice; you had to do it at that time. This is going to be a lot more in depth and intensive decision making. And please, if you do need some support on that, so I'm available, to talk this through to really help you come up with a strategy that's right for you. So, looking at the basis that whenever the timing is, whether it's in a couple of weeks' time, whether it's in 2 months' time, doesn't matter. The challenges that we're going to face are exactly the same. So the first thing we want to look at really is some of the technical challenges. Now I've come up with a few. Please, there is a chat box. If I can find my chat box, where's my chat box there? I can't come on. Oh, don't mess up with me. Okay, where's my chat box disappeared? There's my chat box. Okay. So if you want to put any questions you've got into the chat box, as we go through, then please, that's the best time to sort of ask these guys. They've got a lot of knowledge about it, and we want to sort of, you get your thoughts about what your fears and worries are about these sort of topics that we're going to come up with. So I suppose the first one that I came up with Steph was, we might go, yes, we want to come back to work in a couple of weeks' time, and the excuses start coming out, of employees actually saying, I don't want to come back, I'm fearful for, my own life, etc. What do you feel that resort, or what can we do in these sort of situations?
Well, I think the starting point is understanding why. So again, it's that lovely old-fashioned thing called communication and talking to people. So if you've got people and they're shielding, then they're going to be an obvious because we've got that they're written off for 12 weeks. Doesn't mean they can't work. It just means that they can't be away from their home. So that's one kind of position. The second one could be that actually they're going to struggle with childcare issues, and that's going to be we don't know when the schools, if they're going to be staggered at the same sort of time frame. So that's going to be an issue. And again, thinking from the practical aspects, because we're not going to have a lot of parents aren't going to have the normal buffers they might have in terms of grandparents or other networks that they would have to support children. So again, there's going to be some legitimate stuff around that. And there is the kind of the psychological of actually I just don't want to put myself in a vulnerable position. But there's all those kind of different categories. So like anything, it's talking to the individual, understanding what those might be. We are going to have a responsibility in some form, even when we do kind of gradually come back to carry on with social distancing for some time. So we don't know what the requirements are going to be around PPE in the workplace, but certainly you're going to need to carry out some form of risk assessment in your workplace and think about what that means. And that's going to be different for every single employer. So understanding of those and making sure that you've got clear guidance for employees when they are back, that they're trained accordingly, and then communicating with those who are off as well. Just because the furlough scheme ends at the end of June, obviously our understanding is this is a new legal position that we've got, which we've never had before. So it might be that you can continue to furlough, but obviously at this moment in time you wouldn't get any grant back from the government to cover those. There's lots of different things. It's understanding what you're dealing with and then kind of coming up with a solution accordingly. Yeah.
And I think, one of the key things to this, is, as you said, is communication. And I think communicate early. Don't think on a Friday, send everyone an email to say they're going to come back on Monday. If you put people under pressure to make a decision, then they'll generally go into that reptilian brain function, fight or flight. And that's when I think you're going to get the excuses of, I can't come back because this, and this. Myles, have you had any sort of examples in other areas where, helping people to make those better decisions about whether they should come back to work in this sort of environment?
Yeah, and it starts back with what Stephanie said first, which is that people find it very difficult to distinguish between their fear and the reality. And so the listening, the understanding, and perhaps a little bit of kind of probing into what the fear is. So listening is relatively passive, other than the fact that you're doing your best to understand. But then you might need to kind of crank it up and push in. So what exactly is the fear? Because if you can identify what exactly is the fear is, you might be able to mitigate it in some way.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy to underestimate the number of people out there who are simply fearful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost sort of probably starting on that basis that they are all fearful. They know less than you do. They're watching the news more than you do. They're reading the Daily Mail more than you do, and they're seeing the horror stories, and they think that coming back is going to kill them and their family. So I think you've got to do this sort of in stages. There'll be a wave of people that go, yeah, fine, I just want to get out of home, I want to come back to work. And I always, with all these things, you end up with that sort of normal distribution. It's sort of, the one end, you've got those people that just want to come back. At one end, you've got those people that are just so fearful that they're almost blinded and they can't do anything. And then you've got the sitting on the fence, the positive ones that need a little bit of encouragement, and then the negative ones that probably need a little bit more work. So it's almost get those ones that want to come back, help them to move the ones that are sitting on the fence to come back, and then work a little bit on the other guys, but on a one-to-one basis, I think is really to understand what their real fears are, you know, and that personal connection with them. So what about, again, I suppose this comes into that, you know, there will be some people that are probably more vulnerable than others. And what are your thoughts? You know, are there any additional aspects that we need to take for that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we don't really, this has been like a huge scientific experiment, and we're all like a bunch of guinea pigs, really. And I think we shouldn't underestimate some of the impact this might have had on people's mental health. And, you know, I saw a nice thing the other day which just said, you know, we're not all in the same boat, but we're in the same storm. And different people have got different circumstances. You don't know whether they've got a partner who's lost a job, so they've got more financial worries. You know, whether they've, you know, might have had somebody who's been bereaved, or, you know, they've just got the challenges of looking after a number of different people and the kids off school. So it's kind of, you know, obviously establishing some of those things. If you've got something like an employee assistance program, or EAP as it's sometimes called, make sure you use it, because this is one of the classic things to help support you. Most of them will have a telephone counselling line, and some of them will have face-to-face, which obviously will be via Zoom. If you haven't got one, I always say, even as a small employer, they're one of the best things that you can have. One, because they're actually really useful, and they're a really good way to help people focus on work at work, and they've got somewhere that they're not burdening their home life problems on their workplace. And likewise, you can't just spend a stress claim, an employment claim, if you haven't got one of them. So they're really, really cost effective. You could be looking at £12 per person per year.
Right.
So, you know, there's some great solutions of things out there, and now's the time might be, you know, for a very little cost that you can think about introducing something. Yeah.
Could you put a sort of a link to that on the WhatsApp group, Steph, so people can, because I do think, you know, having access to sort of, you know, sort of part of the mental health thing, but, you know, therapists out there is so important, because the danger, you know, imagine you're sort of, you're not, I don't think many of us have got massive teams here. So, and, you know, a lot of people that, you know, their teams are like family. So a lot of you will be talking to them personally, or, you know, certainly communicating to them personally. Is if they have these issues, and let's say they have this fear, as Myles was sort of saying, or they're vulnerable, and you start that conversation, you know, do you really want to go into the level of depth that you might have to talk about all their problems? And for most of you, A, you won't want to do that, and B, you're not trained to actually deal with it if you do go down there. So to actually say, well, look, I fully understand that. Look, what I think you should do is actually go and talk to somebody that really understands this, can help you, I think is a major thing. And I would normally do that, you know, with organisations where we have these issues, but I think you're right, more so now that you're probably going to get a higher percentage of people that are going to feel that way. So I think having that.
And the advantage of such schemes, they're normally open 24/7, and they have everything from debt counsellors through to just emotional wellbeing. So it's not just the whole just counselling piece. They will have lots of advice generally for people, and they'll have a variety of services, you know, themselves and their families can use it. So
So, and it's just like I used a word earlier, which was in trying to, in response to the first one about people refusing to return to work. I used the word probe, which is a word that has a bit of energy behind it. So what I was not suggesting was that you probe into them, the nature of their discomfort. But you listen to that. That's different. But the place that you might want to probe is into what specifically is the difficulty. So, because if you can understand the difficulties, this is separate. I'm separating the person from the difficulty. Yeah. And if you listen to the person, but you might need to probe into exactly what the difficulty, the barrier is, because that you might be able to solve. Yeah. I've tried. I can't solve people.
Yeah. No, in a way, they have to solve themselves. But yeah, I think that's and be careful. You know, the languaging is so important, isn't it, Myles? You know, you can have the best intentions and say something in a certain way, and it's just misread. Certainly with emails, you know, wherever possible, don't do emails because, you know, an email will be read in the context of how that person feels right at that moment. So if you're in a fearful, scared state and you get an email from somebody, you're going to read it in that state, and you may read all sorts of things that aren't actually, were not meant to be in there. Where you have to do it by email, then make sure you get it sense checked, read, reread by somebody who's not in that process. We just had one for a client that's it's gone through 4 people to read it, to make sure it's good enough to actually go out, and the languaging is right, because words can be very, very powerful in this situation. So we're now in a sort of situation where, yes, great. If all the people want to come back, fantastic. If some of them aren't going to want to come back, we've got to deal with that on a one-to-one individual basis. What happens when we've got people that we sort of maybe can't bring back? Just we've looked at the customers, we looked at the sales, and they're just the business model just doesn't allow us to pay for them. Yes, I think you're right. I think we can furlough them and continue to pay for them, but for many of us, we've got to look at the long-term cash flow, and that just isn't going to sort of work for a lot of people. So what can we be doing now if that's sort of going to be the case, Steph?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say we've nicknamed this the R week, not because of the kind of the social distancing response rate which the government have been using, but I think we've just literally every conversation we've had with our clients this week has been around redundancies or anticipated redundancies. Just as some things to think about. I mean, if we're all employed, then it's not such a challenge. But if you're making any more than 20 redundancies in a rolling 90-day period, then you have to go through collective consultation. And for between 20 and 99, that is 30 days. And for more than the 99 and 100, you have to do 45 days. What that means is that you have to go through and you have to get voting people to represent themselves as employee elected representatives and consult with them back during that time period. Putting that aside, assuming we don't have to do that, you do need to consult with individuals. So it always helps to do your preparatory stuff up front. So look at your organisation charts, make sure you understand who's in which pool, because that's a real common problem where things go wrong. So if you've got a secretary over here in sales, but you've got one in production, there might be secretaries, they probably do broadly similar roles, you need to put them in the same pool. So don't fall into the kind of the falling foul of going, well, actually, I just want to get rid of production, but I want to keep sales as it is. So, you need to do some sense checks, look at who's at risk, what you need to do, plan on what you're going to use as your selection criteria. So don't be worried about using the redundancy word, even if you've got people with less than 2 years service. Obviously, they won't be eligible for statutory redundancy pay, but sometimes it can be emotionally a little bit better to be made redundant than to be let go, because at least there's a reason. At least it's not something personal to you. But think about selection criteria, and obviously the important bit is you need to make sure it's not discriminatory. So you've got disciplinary records, that's always a great one. Absenteeism records, another good one. Just make sure that if you've got anybody who's got a disability, you give them maybe 20% extra allowance, depending on what the nature of that disability is. And certainly anybody who's pregnant, you wouldn't want to include pregnancy-related absence. You've got performance output measures, those sorts of things. Anything you want, try and think up a kind of, a grid and a scoring system by which you're going to measure. So you've done that and you've got the questions ready. Calculate your statutory redundancy pay in advance. Obviously, there's an increase in April, like there is every year, statutory redundancy pay, which is obviously the cap. You can download what's called a Ready Reckoner, which makes life a lot easier. You can look up weeks, age of service, and come up with a formula. And the important one is don't fall foul of notice, because obviously you need to pay the greater of whatever is in the contract or statutory notice. So the contract one's nice and straightforward. You've probably got a week, 4 weeks, a month, 3 months, something like that. But if you've got somebody who, for instance, who's got 8 years service with you, 8 years complete service, and it's got a month in their employment contract, they're actually entitled to 8 weeks notice. So it's a week for every year of service, capped at 12 weeks. And that latter bit is the bit that, again, companies sometimes fall foul of, because you have to pay both bits. So get your plans in place. You need to put people at risk of redundancy first. So again, if you've got a pool of people, you'll need to put them at at risk, and then you'll need to do an individual consultation meeting with each of them. The individual has right of notice to that meeting. They have the right to be accompanied in the same way they do to a disciplinary meeting. You should talk to them about what the situation is, what you're proposing to do, the timeframes that you're proposing to do it in, which could be as little as a few days or a week. It doesn't need to be significant. They're going to have lots of questions. Remember the kind of the Kubler-Ross grief curve. They will be going through things at a different pace to you. So sometimes it's a case of have one meeting and then have another one just to let the news sink in and get used to them, to their ideas, so they can come back with any questions. But then you can obviously press the button and go ahead as you need to.
Yeah, and I think, you know, for this, you know, don't do redundancies alone. You know, I think the worst thing you can do is try and sort of, you know, do amends with this one. You know, get the professionals in, follow the process, do it properly, because, you know, this is the one that will bite you hard, you know, really hard on the arse when if you get it wrong. And that grid, you know, looking down, because the other thing is, don't forget, you're not making people redundant, you're making roles redundant. So you can't just go, I don't like them, so I'm going to make them redundant and then put somebody else into their role. You know, it's after the event, people can look back and go, well, he's just doing the role I was doing, so therefore that role is not redundant. So,
and yeah, watch out for classic things like avoid the last in first out, because by default you can end up with something called an indirect age discrimination claim, because chances are the people who've been with you the shortest are probably on the whole aggregate wise younger than some of the people who are with you. So
yeah,
they're just, you know, the little bits just you need to be careful of.
Yeah, cool, good. And so if there's any questions on this, please, you know, please use that chat box if you've got anything that's specific to your business that you want to bring up. So I suppose I put this one in there alongside that. You know, many times, you know, we sort of get to this situation where, you know, we do find, you know, certain people have worked really well with us, other people have just let us down and let themselves down. If we did decide that, you know, there are some bad apples there that really we just don't want to bring back, yeah, obviously if we're going to use the redundancy rule, then we've got to show fairness. If they're under the 2-year sort of with us, where we don't have to make them redundant, any sort of, I suppose, tips for that? Anything we should be looking out for?
Yeah, I mean, the discrimination was the big piece. So exactly as you said, so on the whole, mostly if people haven't got 2 years service, you're not going to be at risk of unfair dismissal claims. Watch out for notice periods though, because they can sometimes tip you over the 2 years without you realising it.
Yeah.
There are some automatically unfair reasons for which you don't need any service. So for instance, asserting a statutory right is one. So if you're saying, I want to take maternity leave or parental leave, that's a statutory right. Also anything on the grounds of health and safety. So if somebody came back and said, well, I'm not happy to return to work, I don't think you've got a safe workplace, and then you dismiss them, they could try and claim that you're getting rid of them on that ground. So there's those sorts of things to watch out for. And the biggie one is discrimination, because obviously you don't need any service. So you've got the 9 protected characteristics of sex, age, disability, discrimination, sexuality, you know, the whole list of it goes on and on, but the biggie ones tend to be sex, race and age. And you need to make sure that obviously you've got that transparency. So you're not picking so-and-so because actually you think they should have retired because they're old, or you're not picking somebody because you think, well, actually you're quite young and you're a bit lazy. So you need to watch out for those kind of assumptions that you don't fall foul. But broadly on the whole, you know, fairly relatively safe. And I have to say, we've been having lots of conversations with employers going, do you know what, I should have got on and dealt with this beforehand. And it could be that actually you've got quite a good audit trail, even if you've got more than 2 years service. So, you know, don't put off doing it. There's still solutions out there. Or, you know, likewise, if you want to chuck a little bit of money at it now up front, but actually save money longer term, you decide you want to kind of cut your losses, there's nothing stopping you doing something like a settlement agreement. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything on for you, Myles, on this one where
this is technical in a way that I don't deal with much.
I've got the good stuff for you later, but I think Steph's point there is a lot of it is you should have done this earlier. You know, if you've let this one drag on to this point, you know, it's generally because you didn't actually bite the bullet 3 months ago. And that comes back to your performance management metrics. You know, how do you manage people's performance? How do you deal with poor performance at the time of the poor performance? And that's where we are really wanted sort of Myles to sort of help us with that one. And then obviously, you know, when we come back, we are going to have this issue of the social distancing. You know, the fact that, you know, we are going to, as responsible employees, the health and safety, we're going to have our office environments, our workplace environments really prepped for this, and this is going to take a bit of thought process. You see it when you go into the supermarkets already, that they started off with basic chalk lines in the on the pavement. Now they've got the signs in there. They've actually put in the effort in to get these things ready. So you really need to do your risk audit, your health and safety. If you're not good at that, bring in a health and safety expert. Get us another set of eyes, because I think the problem with all of us is we know our businesses so well that we become blind to some obvious things. And again, having that sort of extra set of eyes looking at that is going to really help. Good point. From Anna, what if social distance is not possible with such as a children's nursery? I know schools have been a big part in the news at the moment. It's very difficult to social distance children. Are they carriers? Is it safe for them to hug their grandparents? I saw that one on the news this morning. Any thoughts on that, Steph? That if it isn't possible.
That one's going to be a real challenge, and obviously the talk generally is around a gradual return, and obviously with children, it's not something you can kind of enforce. You can't say stay over there 2 meters and their way. So I think it's going to be a watch the space and see what the government come back with in terms of recommendations and guidance, and obviously just taking that into account and building that into your risk assessments.
Yeah, I think a lot of us we're going to have to make this up. We're going to have to be reactive, but the key is have you done your assessment? Have you looked at it? Is it reasonable? If you've taken reasonable steps, then at the end of the day, this isn't a massive risk, health wise. I know we've got Myles that has had the coronavirus, but it's certainly down in the south where we are, the number of cases is still very low. So we are in a relatively low risk area, but you've still got to take those steps to do what you can.
And this, before you go to go back into sorry, Myles. To go back into the social distancing thing. This is more of a mindset issue than anything else. And I was speaking there's a green outside my house to community police officers the other day, and the amount of abuse they're getting, for people saying, well, it's all a hoax and it's all nonsense, and is just extraordinary. Now, of course, they will be magnets for that, because it's their job to hold people to account. So, but it's this, for most people, this is a mindset issue. It's more than anything else. So that the people who aren't obeying the rules don't see it as an issue, and the way into that is in part to explore the consequences. What is it? Because they're not seeing it. I've had so many conversations with people who are otherwise outwardly intelligent, and they hear the story of what happened to me, and you can see their eyes glaze over with shock and their jaws drop. And mine wasn't particularly, it was bad, but it wasn't the worst. So lots of people simply don't get it. So somehow getting them to understand the consequences to them, to their families, to all of those things, and also perhaps the upside of learning to do it properly, because we're in this for.
So I'm just losing your internet there, Myles.
Bastards.
They've stolen it. Is that virus again?
Yeah, exactly.
But it is, because we got two things. One, we want to sort of, in a way, play that down a little bit, because we want people to come back to work. On the other hand, we want to make people aware of it, because we want them to take precautions. Yeah.
So this is more of my advice then comes from a more remedial space. If people aren't playing the game, it's probably a mindset issue. And it's kind of, yes, you can probably tighten the screws with discipline, but actually inquiring into their mindset and helping them see the consequences is the best way forward.
Yeah.
And just on top of that, if you've got risk assessments, make sure you share them with people, and make sure you keep your training records to show that you've trained. If you've got a policy that says this is what our policy is, make sure you've got that read and the sign and receipt kind of process to say that people have read, understood, and have signed up to it.
Yeah, and also understand. I mean, we had a case recently, and there was a family that just weren't social distancing, and they just weren't doing anything. And we were saying to them, look, why are you not social distancing? He said, well, we don't read the paper, we don't watch the news, we've got no idea what's going on, what's all the fuss about. And it was like, it's almost hard to believe that no one knows what's going on, but they literally did not know what was going on in the world. They'd heard this thing about, but they just dismissed it and ignored it. There are some people that sort of seem to live in a bit of a bubble. So never assume, I think, is the key for that. And I think, if we go back to the grief counselling, again, with that communication, I think that's why I put that on there. So I think Steph's already dealt with is, when you get that situation, have a route out, have a place where those people can go and talk to the professionals, because some people are going to have lost people or know people that have actually died from this, or it's very, very serious for them. So I think you've got to have that compassion with our whole team, and we can only do that if we're actually talking to them. So I think Matt came up with serviced offices, what's the balance between liability, the landlord and the employer, and the employee, the person using these things. I think we've all got to, people have got to take their own responsibility with this. It's like the whole thing with face masks. Are they going to make us all wear face masks when we go out? And it's still debated, but I think if you feel that it's that's what you should do, then you should do it. And if members of the team really feel that way, then I think you've got to listen to them and actually potentially allow that. I know some shops are sort of saying we'd rather not have face masks for our people, but if that's the case, then put the screens up. You're just trying to protect that, keep that barrier for them. So have those in place as well. So we've gone through that process. We've sort of said, right, guys, we've done the legal side. We've got the our people aren't coming back, but the people are now coming back into that environment. And my view for this is, leadership and management now is probably more important than it has ever been. It's always important, but you're bringing people back that have been off for probably the longest period they've ever had off from work. 3 weeks. Very few of your team have been off for 3 weeks. We're in a very challenging situation, economically, environmentally, and certainly with the business as well. You as business owners are probably not in the greatest space. A lot of you are extremely tired, confused, lacking in patience. And so you put all this combination together, and you bring people back into the work environment. It's almost like you put the gunpowder in, you've put the, all the things that can explode, and then you light the touch paper, and you're not expecting it to all explode in your face. And I know, Myles and I were on a course a few weeks ago, and we were talking about this concept of lead, manage, and coach, and the difference between those three. How do you see this sort of panning out for these guys as business owners, in those early few weeks of bringing people back into this sort of situation, Myles?
Is it possible that I've got a slide on this? Can we?
I've never tried this before, Myles. You're playing with technology, but we can give it a go. I'm not sure it's going to record, so for those that weren't here, you're going to miss out on this, but we'll see if it does.
Well, anything could happen, can't it? Can you see that?
Nothing's come up yet, Myles.
Bastards.
We should have rehearsed this, Myles.
Okay, if not, I can just speak to it. No, this isn't playing. It's going to take too long. All right. Let's just go back to where we were. So let me talk you through it, and I'll take one step back from the idea of lead, manage, coach, which was there is a gentleman by name Tim Galway who wrote a book in the 70s, and then different versions of the book over the years, called The Inner Game. And the first one was The Inner Game of Tennis. And what he's trying to make is a distinction between the behaviors that people might learn, for instance, on tennis, how to hold a racket, and what's going on in your head, so the inner game. And he had this wonderfully simple notion, which was that that people have potential, and that they perform, but those things are always slightly different. So I never perform to my potential. So he wrote that as potential, and then he wrote first performance, then put an equal sign, and then wrote the word potential. And then that's clearly not true. But then he wrote this little piece at the end of the equation, which says that minus interference. So your performance is equal to your potential minus interference. So you've got people coming back into the workplace, and boy, will they have interference going.
Yeah.
So interference is usually based in, is usually internal and based in self-doubt and fear. And sometimes those things it's reasonable to be fearful of those things. So the broader question is, how can you reduce that level of interference? Because the less interference there is, the more of somebody's potential is available, the better they perform. So the job is to reduce the interference. And we've effectively been speaking about some of those things already in this conversation. But remember that they're, so out of that simple idea, then the idea of lead, manage, and coach, what that refers to is 3 essential skills that a leader manager needs to deploy with the individuals who make up their team. And the distinction is lead is about, I'll say the words quickly and then go back to them specifically. Lead is about why, manage is about what, and coach is about how. So what I mean by lead and why is that people need to understand at a higher level the context in which they're working, the business context. They need to remember what it is that the business is about. They need to understand the overarching business objectives. And you need to help them then understand why their role is important in that context. And that there should be ideally some clear alignment between what you're asking me as an individual to do and that overarching set of goals. So I see what I'm contributing to. And if you think about it, if you took I won't go there yet. So that's the first piece, understanding the overarching objectives, the context, and how that relates to me, what I'm doing, my role is aligned to that. Once that's clear, you then move into the what. So the manage piece. Out of understanding what my role is, I need to have huge clarity about what's expected of me. And my experience is that 90% of British workers do not have that clarity, that pinpoint focus that says, this is what I'm here to do today. I have many devices to help me do that. And in these times, because I'm working remotely with a loose team, and I'm writing mostly, it's quite a lonely activity. I've got a little sign on my door which says, make today count. And that gives me that pinpoint focus in each day. So if you can help people have that clarity. So out of why comes what, and what that includes is my role, my goals, the standards you're expecting of me, and those are the things to which you hold me to account. So I'm seeing people coming back into the workplace, and I'm imagining that having been sick and coming back in, I notice even me, it's taken me days to remember what I'm about and what I'm trying to do. But they will have forgotten. They will have forgotten what's important. They will drift in on that Monday morning. So helping people understand the why and then understanding what their individual what is. So lead, manage. And the third piece is slightly, it's totally different. And it's different in this way. It's coach. See, when you're doing the lead piece and the manage piece, you're in charge. you've got the authority. You're the manager, you're the leader, you're the owner of the organization. So you have the final word about what the why is and what the what is. But in the coaching piece, that's about how somebody does something. That's completely different. If you start getting involved in how people do things, you won't have time to have the kinds of strategic thoughts that you need to have in the first place, and you'll completely fuck them up. It's like, here's an analogy. If you stand on a tennis court, you've agreed to play in a specific game by that organization, the International Tennis Federation's rules. The umpire's job is to uphold the rules. So that's kind of, when I join a company, I agree to that organization's why, and I sign off with my manager on a what. And the manager's job is to hold that line. When I stand on a tennis court, I can play the game in any way I choose. I'm left-handed. Don't make me play right-handed. I can be aggressive and attacking, or I can be defensive. So what you want to have is that people own the how. And the best way to do that is once you've established the goals, you then say, so whatever your name is, how are you going to go about that? And you help them create their own action plan. You want them to be doing the thinking. And it's really just about gentle questions. How are you going to do it? What are the milestones? What are you going to do next? It's simple questions and a lot of listening. And if you can achieve, this is the last thing I'm going to say, because I'm going to turn it on its head. So back to that idea of interference. If somebody doesn't know why their role is important, if somebody doesn't even really know what their role is and what's expected of them, and if they don't know where to start and how they're going to complete it, so if why, what, and how aren't there, why are they running a lot of interference? If you can reduce all of that, you're creating the conditions in which people can perform to their best. And so my final point is, this is particularly true of where you are right now. It's also really equally valid when you're managing virtual teams. And I'm teaching this literally all over the world. We've just gone live with 1,700 people in China teaching lead managed coach. And they're people who are in large organizations who are managing largish teams. It's valid in all of those scenarios. So that was the bit I wanted to leave behind.
Yeah, no, I think, that's, can you see the writing on the screen? I've just annotated. I don't know, first time I've done this, so hopefully that's worked. But looking at it in that perspective, as a business owner, certainly now where we're bringing people back, we've really got to get across that message why we're coming back now. Certainly, if we're going to come back to what the outside world might see as being early. Where you could keep furloughing me to the end of June. Well, this is why, and you've got to have that why can't just be because I think that's the right thing to do. They have to understand that bigger picture of the purpose of, when it's our customers. Our customers need us to be back here. There's got to be a real something that they're going to buy into. The managing is, and I'll probably come on to that in a minute. The what potentially has changed. The way we're going to manage this has changed. And those, so the purpose is that sort of the getting their hearts involved in this. The management is getting their minds into the game of what they can actually do. And for many of us, we don't have the resources where we can bring in additional coaches and actually help people in. We potentially have to do that ourselves, but actually what we want to build is a coaching mindset organization, where they can actually coach each other, they can have that support network and actually have the conversations going of, right, how are we going to do this? Start the conversations, let people coach each other to actually perform at a higher level. But the management is, I love that analogy of the tennis court. As the umpire, you've got to hold people to account, and if you hold them to account, then you come down off your perch and then start coaching somebody after you just told them off because they haven't done it. It's sort of, well, what the hell's going on here? So you've got to actually have that built in. So if I can come out of that one, so right, let's come back to there. So this brought me on to sort of the second thing is, you know, the game of business that we were in a month ago is completely different to the game of business we're going to be in now. You know, if we were playing tennis, you know, a month ago, we're going to come back and we potentially could be playing squash. So really understanding, you know, this new game and getting people realigning people back to the purpose. You know, what is the game we're actually playing? How are we going to play this? You know, what are we actually going to do is really, really key with this. And that goes back to Myles's point about that interference is, you know, if the game has changed and we're not clear what's happened, that's just going to build interference. You know, they're going to get more confused. You know, how do we play this game with social distancing? You know, we've never played it before where we've been apart. You know, we've got remote people. We've never played this game where we're remote. So, you know, within that sort of aspect, Myles, what's any sort of thoughts of taking those concepts and applying it into that context?
The thing that stands out from me in this conversation, and it's obviously things that you and I would teach, is that the whole idea of preparation. So one of our clients in China was disrupted given the situation in January as we began a rollout. When we started up again with them 6 weeks ago, we completely relaunched the business. So from something earlier you were saying about, you know, making your decisions about coming back to work and being really clear about why and when. Then I linked that, Kevin, with what you said, having spoken about lead managed coach, and you contextualize that as you need to tell your people why you've chosen to open your doors right now and what your intent is and all of those things. So I just think the clarity of thought that you bring to this beforehand, including understanding the new game, because that'll be part of the lead circuit, the lead part of this, is just, it will pay huge dividends if you put the thought into that.
Yeah. and it also comes back to, you know, that if we are playing new games, then potentially the scoring system that we're going to be scoring that game on is going to be different as well. You know, certainly I'm seeing this with sales teams that, you know, in the past, sales team's score was always on, you know, well, how many sales have I done? Have I got the results? Now, we're coming into a marketplace now where the field has changed completely. And maybe that scoring mechanism needs to be different. Yeah, because if you just score people on the same way as you did before, all they're going to do is every single day, every single week is fail. You know, and people who fail on a regular basis, their motivation levels disappear pretty darn quick. So if we change the game into one of activity, right, well, it's not about results anymore, it's about activity. We can actually win that game because you're still in control of the activity. You can still do 100 calls. You can still speak to your 20 people. You know, so therefore the scoring mechanism needs to change. So this adaptability of coming back and looking at every aspect of the business and going, is the game still the same game or has the game changed? The game's changed as the scoring changed. You know, how we manage that, how we monitor people, and comes back to, you know, we definitely need to coach people better. So if you've been playing tennis all your life, Myles, and I suddenly get you back into play squash, you know, I'm going to need to step up my coaching for you because that backhand ain't going to work on a squash court, mate. So that sort of brings us on then onto focus. You know, in a world where, you know, it's bizarre when you look back and you say that was the normal. It's like, so remember the day when it was normal, you know, well, this is the new normal. But I think, you know, if you remember back about a month ago, you know, our focus this does come back to the why, our focus on our purpose, where our business was going, was hopefully quite clear. You know, we had a clear plan. This is our next 5 years. This is what we're actually doing. And in those times where things are good, you know, imagine being on a ship in nice calm water. You know, we're up on the deck, we're looking a long way ahead. When the storm hits and everything sort of starts getting shaken up, our focus naturally is going to come far more short-sighted. It's going to come very, very short-term, you know, looking right at the here and now, which, you know, is needed in a crisis situation. But actually, that's when we miss the iceberg. So if you think about the Titanic, you know, the fog came in, focus came very, very short, and suddenly you hit a bloody iceberg. So any sort of thoughts on, you know, as business owners, Myles, how we get this sort of big picture, small picture, the ability to sort of, you know, change our focus on a day-to-day basis?
I can't say anything that's going to be very revealing, but the point is, it's just so important that we need to be really clear about our direction of travel, and for the business, and where you intend to be, and whatever the timeframes that are relevant to you. You know, 5 years, 3 years, 1 year, and you build into your schedule, or however you do it, time when you can reflect on that. Because if you lose one, reflecting on it means adapting the direction of travel to the circumstance, but it also means then making sure that any action you take or dictate, that you ask the question, is this taking me closer to or further from my direction of travel? And some may be, as a function of an immediate necessity, may take you temporarily away from your direction of travel, but you need to do that consciously. So I completely endorse this.
Yeah. So really think, you know, on a day-to-day basis, you might have been doing 12-month plans. Well, now you got to do 3-month plans. You might, if you're doing 3-month plans, you need to be doing monthly plans, you know, down to weekly, down to daily. You know, the more confidence you have in the direction you're going and what you're doing, the more confidence you're going to give out to that team, which comes back to those, you know, lead, manage and coach. You know, there's nothing worse than, you know, if the captain of the ship is running around panicking, you know, well, what's the rest of the crew going to be doing? So, you know, you've got to maintain that. If you're going to bring people back in this situation, you've got to have that confidence that, yeah, this is, whether it's the right thing or not, that sort of doesn't matter. Make a decision, stick with the decision, see the decision through. You know, if they see you procrastinating and you know, worried about whether this is the right thing, you know, they have this amazing ability to smell it. You know, you can smell fear, can't you, Myles, from a long way off. So, you know, make sure you have those times to come out of the business, talk it through, you know, get clarity of where your focus is, and then go back with that confidence that, right, guys, no, this is what we're actually going to do. And I think this was my final one, but honesty. You know, honesty in these times, it's a tough one, you know, because if we were completely honest with all of our team, we'd be standing up saying, I've no fucking idea what I'm doing. And so what about this sort of balance of being, you know, completely honest with people, but giving them what they need to know rather than telling them everything?
You're asking me?
Yes, Myles, yeah.
But so first of all, make the distinction around interference. So if I tell this person something, am I going to remove an interference or create one?
Good point, yeah.
So if you're going to reveal something about yourself and your own uncertainty, then with the vast majority of people, that really isn't going to help. With a great lieutenant, or, you know, somebody who's a kind of in your leadership circle, on the other hand, it could be a door opener that will cause better conversations to happen. So the question is, in doing this, what's my intent? Is it going to generate interference or reduce interference?
Yeah.
I completely endorse the notion of honesty and transparency, but they're big guns. So be clear about your intent.
Yeah, I think that sums it up really. If it takes away, you know, if it adds to interference, then be careful. You know, don't say if it's going to, you know, clear that interference, then yes. certainly, if you look at the financial status, as business owners, we've done those plans. That's why we've come back. If we look at the cash flow and the cash, let's say the cash runs out in July, that, to be honest, would be to tell everybody, look, guys, we're back at work because the cash runs out of July, and at the end of July we have no business. But if that's going to add panic and interference into people who can't do anything about it, I think that's the key thing. Is if you give people information that they can do something about it, then that's going to reduce interference. If you give people information they can't do anything about it or feel they can't, you're just going to create more panic, more stress in that person. So really sort of think, back to who do you be really honest with, because there's some people you need to be more honest with, and really show that visibility of where we are, what the situation is. But there'll be some people where actually that will cause them pain and cause them more stress, and to avoid that. So to really look at those key things. So any other sort of points, Myles, from you and Steph as well, sort of around this sort of getting the team back, gelling, working strongly, so that irrespective of what happens around us, that we give it the best chance of success. Stephanie, you can.
Stephanie?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest challenge I can see happening is actually being a kind of almost a them and us camp around the people who've been furloughed and the people who haven't.
Yep.
And kind of the coming back. And I had a conversation with somebody this morning saying, well, it's all very well when furlough's lifted, but haven't maybe got enough work for them to do, and I've got to bring them back up to speed. So, in some ways, in the same way you do an induction when somebody joins your business, think about, you need to get people back up to speed, and you need to watch out for that whole kind of fairness piece, because emotions will be running high. And again, it's that kind of goes back to that visibility, honesty piece, isn't it? It's the talking to people and getting them to find out what the crux of any problems that might be there, so you can nip things in the bud if it does start to fester. Yeah,
almost thinking of it like a brand new employee coming into the team. How would you induct them? Almost go back to let's have a 2-week induction process where we bring them in and induct them back into the organisation and move them forwards. One question on that bit, Myles, with your sort of sporting background, where I was sort of thinking was almost like sort of the England sort of football team or rugby team, or the first game of the season where people have been off, doing other things, and then they're coming back into that team environment, and we want them to be up to high level performance very quickly. Is there anything that you've come across from a sporting world that we can pick up that helps that?
No, thank you very much.
I'll put you right on the spot there.
I have to be truthful. It's nothing different to what we've said. There's a balance here that I don't know if you remember. It's a few years back, before Eddie Jones took over, where the Italians. No, Eddie just started. The Italians were playing the English here in Twickenham, and the Italians did something really naughty but was within the rules. So they changed the pattern and they circled around the back of the scrum. It was legal. But because the English team are the failure of the methodology is that they follow instructions. They're not thinking, they're following the rule book. So all these guys simply didn't know what to do in the face of this disruption. And the referee, they asked the referee a question, a stupid question, and the referee said, "I am not your coach." So one, you've got to get an incredible balance between, through the management part of this, the managed part of this, giving people as much clarity as you possibly can, but also not so much that they're actually tied into doing the wrong things. They've got to be in a place where they can think for themselves, because they're seeing as much as you're seeing, particularly the senior ones.
Yeah.
And you want their response, and you want them to be flexible, and you want them to be able to pivot and do something different. So yes, the rule book needs to be clear, and you get that in place as quickly as you can. And I think your idea kind of thinking that kind of a re-induction program is brilliant. And making sure people are actually thinking for themselves again.
Yeah, and I think that does come back to your lead, manage, coach aspect. That go back to that rugby situation. That you can be very clear what the why is, the what we need to do. But if you take away from, if you do too much of that, this is what you need to do. You need to do this. All you get is yes men and people that just, well, you tell me what to do and I'll do it. But then you're having to micromanage those people to get them to actually keep going. What you want them to do is to actually own the problem, own that solution, and have the how. And we have a big thing in coaching. One of the techniques is, where's the think bubble? If the think bubble's over your head, then you're not helping that person. The think bubble, they need to have the think bubble over their head going, right, this is a situation. Go back to we talked about the social distancing. You don't want to be having to solve all of their problems. It's, look, you understand the game. The game is to stay 2 meters apart, keep people safe. How are we going to do that? Put it back to them. Let them own their health, their safety. If you keep coming in and going, right, okay, well, I'll fix that, 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 all you're going to get is this dependent person, who, when it goes wrong, guess who they're going to blame? It went wrong because, you never told me what I had to do. And then you're in a very, very difficult situation. And that's where, you as managers will just burn yourself out, because you just physically can't deal with all of those people going, what do I do next? What do I do next? What do I do next? And if you get that, I think that's the first sign, really, where you're not, you've stopped on lead manage, and you're not coaching people to actually become better people in their own right. So I think we're about out of time. I think, Matt, you've asked a question, which is probably best if you ask the question. Can you unmute yourself? If you just press the space bar, Matt, and then you can just ask that question. Or is he going to go shy on me? Are you there, Matt? Let me see if I can find him. I'll unmute you, Matt. Ooh. Are you there? No, he's all gone shy. Okay, well, I wasn't too sure on the issue of that question. So his mic's not working. But he said, what about the beneficial outcomes from the lockdown, harnessing the establishment of remote working practices? The way I'm reading that is, yes, a lot of us have gone to Zoom and we're actually finding this actually a benefit. So again, go back to your strategy, look at that long term. If your strategy is going to change and actually being remote, not going back to offices you think is the right thing, then 100% go for it. But make sure your team are aware that the game has now changed. It's either a temporary fix or it's a long-term strategy. And if it's a long-term strategy, go back to the why, as Myles said, be really clear what the purpose is, where we see, and paint that picture where you want to be, and then go back, reset the rules of the game. This is now how we're going to manage this, and then help people to actually work, because it might be a great idea for you and you may love doing Zoom and stuff like that because it suits your personality. Doesn't suit everybody.
Lots of people come to work for social reasons. Exactly.
Yeah, they that's their escape from their day-to-day life, and the thought of actually being stuck at home, more than they actually have to, actually fears them with dread.
Yeah,
I know some of you out there are those people as well. So
we work on the basis that most people need to work for money, but you choose where to work and you do that on a social basis.
It's a very complex thing. So you've got to look at it, and maybe if you're going to do that, you may have to change. The team may have to change. You may have to go and change the whole team to one that actually wants to do that, because they were recruited under the old rules, and if you change the rules, then there is a chance that you may have to change the players. So that's brilliant. Well, look, thank you very much, Myles. I really appreciate you giving up your time, and Stephanie as well. And thanks for being on the call here. So if you do want a bit of help and support with that re-engagement plan, please speak to me. I'm keeping these sort of 9 till 10 every day free for people to talk about their ideas. I know for the detail of the redundancies and those things, Steph is on hand. I know she's helping a number of you, and sort of helping more and more as we go through, because you've got to get this right. It's too risky to do this half-cocked and not think it right the way through. For those that haven't joined the WhatsApp group, please do. If you'd like to join it, where we actually promote these things, put more ideas up there, then just email me outside of this, and I'll send you the link to get you on the WhatsApp group. And I'm hoping that next week we're going to start looking at opportunities. So really, where we see in the marketplace, for a lot of people, that the opportunities that are way beyond just getting back to work. Looking at potentials of acquisitions, mergers. I know a number of you have pivoted already. How do we exploit that? How do we take that further? I have word out to try and find some equally good guests for that show next week. I might change that, because the person I'm trying to get on that, I'm not sure can make next week. So you'll just have to keep an eye out on the WhatsApp group for a slight change if that does. But and if you are interested in really continuing that personal growth, we're running the book club now every Friday at 5:30 over a beer. This week's is The Power of Habits. How do we create? Have you read that book, Myles?
Yeah.
We just got the business summary on it. It's very good, actually. It's a bit like Atomic Habits, James Clear, but really into that psychology of how habits form and why they're difficult to break and form new habits, and go back to that change in the game. The habits that we all had, don't expect people not to do what they always did. So if they come in and don't social distance, they're not doing it to piss you off. It's because the old habit of doing what they always did is ingrained in their minds. So you've got to help them create some new habits to actually overcome that. So we'll be posting that out on the WhatsApp group as well. So just leaves me to say thanks, guys. Really appreciate your time. Thanks for everybody that's attended. For those that are watching this on video, I hope the tech has actually worked. And have a fantastic weekend. Good luck next week, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. So thanks again. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.